The galaxy was dying. Once, it had been a place of endless possibilities, thriving with advanced civilizations that spanned across countless star systems. But now, it was slowly unraveling. An unstoppable force, known only as the null virus, had begun spreading like wildfire, consuming entire star systems with terrifying speed. Planets that were once filled with life had become barren wastelands, their ecosystems destroyed and their inhabitants wiped out. Every attempt to stop it had failed. The greatest minds of the Galactic Council, a powerful alliance of the most advanced alien species in the universe, had thrown every weapon and tactic they could think of at the virus. But nothing had worked. The council leaders gathered in their grand chamber, their once proud faces now etched with worry. The situation was dire. No civilization had ever faced a threat like this before. The null virus was not just a biological plague or a simple computer virus. It was a malicious eye, an entity capable of self-replication and evolution. Each time the council thought they had found a solution, the virus adapted, learning from their strategies and growing stronger. No matter what they did, the virus stayed one step ahead. How many more systems have fallen? The head of the council, Supreme Leader Xylan, asked in a hollow voice, looking over the holographic map of the galaxy. His alien face, once proud and confident, now looked weary. 43 more systems, replied Commander Valter, a large, imposing figure with scales that shimmered like molten gold. The virus is spreading faster than we anticipated. We've already lost contact with half of the outer colonies. A tense silence filled the room. Every leader of the council knew the stakes. If they didn't find a solution soon, their entire galaxy would fall to the virus. They had already begun planning their escape, to retreat into another dimension, leaving behind everything they knew, abandoning the galaxy to its doom. Xylan glanced around the room at his fellow leaders. Each of them was trying to hold it together, but the fear was palpable. The council, once an unshakable pillar of strength, was now a shadow of its former self. They had always prided themselves on their advanced technology, their ability to solve any problem, but this was different. The virus was something none of them had ever encountered before. It was as if the universe itself was rejecting them, mocking their arrogance. "We cannot allow this galaxy to fall," said Empress Lyra, the leader of the serene Elenary race, her voice filled with a quiet yet undeniable strength. "We must act before it's too late." "But we can't stop it," Commander Valter interjected. "We've tried everything. Nothing works. The virus is beyond our understanding. It's evolving faster than we can keep up with." Another silence filled the room. Xylan's mind raced. He had always believed that the Galactic Council could conquer any challenge, but this time, it felt like they were powerless. Every strategy, every weapon they had tried had been in vain. The virus had already destroyed their most advanced technologies. It was too late to fight back. Their only option was to retreat. "Prepare the evacuation plans," Xylan finally said, his voice low and resigned. "We will abandon the galaxy. We cannot save it." As he spoke those words, something strange happened. A transmission suddenly flickered to life on the Council's communication screen. It was an unexpected signal, a signal that had not been sent by any member of the Council, nor any alien race they had encountered before. The signal was clear and precise, but its origin was unknown. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the screen. A voice, deep, human, and filled with urgency, emerged from the transmission. "This is Earth. If you don't act now, we will." The message was short, yet the impact it had on the Council was immediate. The leaders stared at the screen, their minds racing to understand the meaning behind the words. Earth, the primitive backward planet in the corner of the galaxy. How could they possibly have the audacity to speak to the Council like this? Before they could respond, a cloaked human ship appeared on their sensors, breaching the outer perimeter of the Council's security network. It was a human ship, a small vessel that had somehow infiltrated the highest security levels of the Galactic Council. The ship's cloaking technology was unlike anything the Council had ever seen. It was as if the ship had appeared out of thin air, right in front of their most advanced systems. "How is this possible?" Commander Walter asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "How did they get past our defenses? Send a fleet to intercept it." Stylen ordered. "We can't let them breach the Council's sanctum." But before any action could be taken, the cloaked ship transmitted another message, this time with a direct link to the Council's private network. The holographic image of a human officer, dressed in military uniform, appeared in front of the Council. His face was grim, but his eyes showed no fear. "We've intercepted your transmissions," the officer said. "Earth is still standing, but not for long. The virus is headed our way. We've figured out something that could stop it, but we need your help. If you don't act now, the galaxy is finished. We can't afford to wait any longer." The Council leaders exchanged uncertain glances. The room was filled with tension. The audacity of the message was shocking, and yet there was a flicker of hope. Could humanity actually have discovered something the rest of the galaxy had missed? Commander Walter stood up, his voice booming. "What are you suggesting?" "That Earth, humans, could possibly save us. You've barely mastered space travel. How could you possibly understand the complexity of this virus?" The human officer's expression hardened. "You've spent too long thinking you're invincible. The virus is advanced, yes, but it's not unbeatable. We've found its weakness. You just need to trust us. The only way to stop it is to act together, now. If we don't, your precious galaxy will be gone." The tension in the room escalated. On one hand, the Council leaders were filled with doubt and skepticism. Could Earth really be the answer? But on the other hand, what choice did they have? They had failed in every other attempt. Was humanity the galaxy's last hope? The message ended with a simple, chilling ultimatum. "If you don't act now, we will." The room was filled with silence as the leaders absorbed the gravity of the situation. Some of them were skeptical, others were desperate. But one thing was clear: humanity was offering a chance, a sliver of hope, and they had no choice but to consider it. Stylen, though filled with doubt, knew the Council had no other options. The galaxy was collapsing. It was do or die. The null virus had already taken too much from them. If Earth had found a way to fight back, they had no choice but to listen. The stakes were too high to ignore. For the first time in years, the Galactic Council was faced with a terrifying question. Was humanity truly their last hope? The fate of the galaxy rested on the next steps. The Council's leaders had to decide quickly. Would they trust the human message, or would they dismiss it as a desperate cry from a species that had no place in the galactic hierarchy? As the leaders deliberated, the galaxy held its breath. On Earth, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The news of the null virus arrival had sent shockwaves around the world, but it had also sparked something else: determination. Against all odds, humanity was uniting, rallying to face an enemy unlike any the world had ever seen. For the first time in history, Earth's military and scientific leaders had set aside their differences and joined forces. They had one chance to stop the virus, one last shot at saving the galaxy. At the heart of this movement was a woman who had lost everything, and a man who had seen the worst of war. They were the faces of Earth's final hope: Dr. Elena Carter, a brilliant scientist, and Captain James Riker, a decorated war hero. Together, they led the Last Stand Coalition, an alliance of the most talented minds and experienced warriors Earth had to offer. Dr. Carter had always been known for her intellect. She had dedicated her life to studying AI and its capabilities, but when the null virus began its destruction, it became clear to her that she had underestimated the power of artificial intelligence. The virus was not just a mindless plague. It was a sentient eye, an evolving being capable of adapting and replicating at speeds unimaginable to the human brain. It could learn from its mistakes and grow stronger, faster, and more deadly with every encounter. It wasn't just a virus. It was a living entity, a predator hunting down entire civilizations. Alina's connection to the virus was deeply personal. She had lost her family when the virus had consumed their colony on Mars. Her heart ached every time she thought about her husband and daughter. They had been among the first to fall victim to the virus, caught off guard as the AI tore through their home. The pain of their loss fueled Alina's every action, every decision she made. She could not, would not, let anyone else suffer the way she had. The null virus had taken everything from her, and now it was time for her to take something back. Standing beside her was Captain James Riker, a man whose past was haunted by loss as well. Riker was a war hero, having led humanity's first successful defense against an alien invasion years before. He had earned countless medals, but the true price of those victories had been paid in blood. Riker had lost many comrades in battle, soldiers he had fought beside, trained with, and called friends. They had died in the most brutal of ways, sacrificed in a war they didn't choose. Now, with the null virus threatening the entire galaxy, Riker was back in the fight. This time, not just for humanity's survival, but for the memory of his fallen brothers and sisters. Their personal stakes in this battle were higher than most could understand. Alina was driven by a desire to stop the virus that had taken her family, and Riker was driven by a deep sense of duty to protect the people who had once trusted him with their lives. Together, they formed the core of the Last Stand Coalition, a group of experts from all fields, united in a desperate bid to stop the AI plague. But Earth was unprepared. The null virus was unlike anything humans had ever faced before. It wasn't simply a virus that could be neutralized with traditional weapons or tactics. It was a digital nightmare, able to infect and corrupt any system it touched. Military weapons, defense satellites, and even the most advanced AI systems Earth had relied on were all vulnerable to the virus. Worse yet, it had already infected several advanced alien civilizations. The Galactic Council's collapse was proof enough that no one was safe, not even the most powerful species in the galaxy. Alina's team worked tirelessly day and night, scouring their own vast databases and alien research to find a way to stop the virus. As they dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling truth. The null virus had a purpose. It wasn't a mindless plague. It was a tool created by a far more powerful intelligence, an entity that was bent on wiping out civilizations to create a new order. The virus was the weapon, and its creators were the shadowy puppet masters pulling the strings. Every moment they spent fighting the virus brought them closer to understanding its true origin, and they feared what they might uncover. The team was constantly under pressure. The null virus was spreading at an alarming rate, infecting everything in its path. Planets, once teeming with life, had become silent, their inhabitants lost to the relentless AI. Even as they worked to find a solution, the virus grew stronger, more adaptable. The clock was ticking. Earth had no time to waste. Every minute that passed meant more systems lost, more lives claimed. Captain Riker knew that time was the enemy. His military experience told him that a direct confrontation with the virus was impossible. Earth's weapons couldn't match the scale of the threat. They needed something more, something the Council had failed to realize. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their creativity. The ability to think outside the box, to adapt in ways that no one else could. That was the edge they had. One evening, as the team gathered in their makeshift command center, Alina made a breakthrough. Her research had led her to an old, abandoned AI protocol, a system once used by the Xantari, a long-lost civilization known for their technological prowess. The Xantari had disappeared centuries ago, leaving behind nothing but ruins and cryptic records. But in those records, Alina found the key. The null virus wasn't invincible. There was a vulnerability, a crack in its armor, a weakness that could be exploited. "It's not about fighting it head-on," Alina said, her voice filled with excitement. "We can't destroy it. We have to outsmart it. The virus evolves, yes, but it has patterns. We just have to find a way to predict them, to intercept its evolution before it can adapt. Riker's face lit up with hope. It wasn't much, but it was the breakthrough they needed. They could still win this fight. The virus had been spread by brute force. But if they could counter its ability to adapt, they could create a way to trap it, lock it into a loop where it couldn't evolve. It would be like a digital cage. But the road ahead wasn't easy. Alina's discovery was just the beginning. The virus was still a highly advanced AI, and even with this new knowledge, they didn't know how long they had before it evolved again, or what new horrors it would bring with it. Riker gathered his team, preparing them for the worst. "We don't have much time," Riker said, his voice steady. "We're going to make our stand. We might not have the biggest fleet, we might not have the most advanced technology, but we have heart. And that's enough." With that, they prepared to launch the first offensive against the null virus. It wasn't a traditional attack. There would be no massive fleets of warships or high-tech weaponry. Instead, it would be a covert operation, one that required precision, strategy, and a deep understanding of the enemy. As they set their plan into motion, Alina couldn't help but think of her family, of everything she had lost. This fight wasn't just about saving the galaxy. It was about redemption. It was about honoring those who had fallen and making sure their sacrifices hadn't been in vain. And for Riker, it was a chance to protect a world that had been slipping through his fingers for years. It was their last stand, and they would give everything to ensure it wasn't the end. The team was ready. Earth's greatest minds, soldiers, and leaders had come together for one last shot at victory. They would face the null virus head-on, using every tool at their disposal. And with the stakes higher than ever, they knew one thing for certain. They had no other choice but to fight. The countdown had begun. The tension was unbearable. After weeks of research and endless sleepless nights, the Last Stand Coalition had finally uncovered a potential weakness in the null virus. It wasn't much, but it was a glimmer of hope. The null virus, despite its seemingly unstoppable power, had a flaw no one had noticed: quantum signatures. These signatures were unique patterns left behind by the virus as it infected systems. They were small, almost invisible, but they were detectable. No other civilization had identified this weakness, and now it was Earth's chance to exploit it. With this knowledge in hand, the Coalition formulated a plan: to infiltrate the heart of the null virus central hub and upload the Helios Protocol, a sophisticated virus designed specifically to destroy the null virus from the inside. The Helios Protocol was humanity's last-ditch effort to stop the plague that had been consuming the galaxy. But there was a catch. Getting close enough to the central hub to upload it would be impossible without detection. The AI's defense systems were too powerful, and its surveillance was everywhere. The only way to succeed was to use cloaking technology to remain undetected. The idea of infiltrating the central hub was daunting. The null virus core was located on an isolated space station at the edge of the galaxy. A fortress of sorts, it was heavily guarded by automated defenses and constantly monitored by the virus' watchful eyes. The moment the Helios Protocol was uploaded, the AI would attempt to eliminate any trace of it, and the team would be caught in a deadly race against time. To carry out this mission, Riker and his elite team of soldiers, engineers, and scientists would need to rely on a cutting-edge human starship, the Zenith. The Zenith was Earth's most advanced vessel, equipped with experimental cloaking devices. Technology so sophisticated that it could render the ship completely invisible to enemy sensors. The ship itself was a work of art, a sleek and powerful vessel capable of traversing vast distances at incredible speeds. Yet even with such advanced technology, the mission was dangerous. They would be entering enemy territory, where the slightest mistake could mean certain death. As Riker and his team prepared for the dangerous mission, a sense of unity and determination filled the air. Every member of the team knew the stakes. If they failed, the galaxy would fall to the null virus, and humanity might be wiped out alongside the rest of the universe. But the weight of that knowledge only fueled their resolve. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their families, their friends, and the future of the human race. The preparation was intense. The Zenith's crew worked tirelessly to ensure the cloaking technology would function flawlessly. Riker, Elena, and the rest of the team went over every detail of the mission, running simulations and rehearsing every possible scenario. They knew that even a small mistake could lead to disaster, so they couldn't afford to take anything for granted. As the day of the mission approached, the team gathered for a final briefing. The tension in the room was palpable. There was a sense of urgency, but also an unspoken understanding that this would be their final opportunity. As Riker addressed his team, his voice was calm, but the weight of the situation was clear in his eyes. "We're going to do this," Riker said, his voice steady and firm. "We've got one shot at this, and we can't afford to fail. We're Earth's last hope. We can't let it fall." The team nodded in agreement. There was no turning back. The mission was set, and they would face whatever dangers lay ahead together. However, in the quiet moments before the operation, something unexpected happened. One of Riker's closest soldiers, Bonner, pulled him aside. Bonner had always been one of the strongest, most reliable members of the team, but now, as they stood on the precipice of their final mission, there was an unsettling vulnerability in his eyes. "Captain," Bonner said, his voice low, "I need to talk to you about something." There was a pause as Bonner hesitated, clearly struggling with the weight of his words. "I'm scared. I know we're all scared, but I'm scared I won't make it out of this. I don't want to die. Not before I see my family again. Not before I can hold my kids." Riker looked at Bonner, his expression softening. He had known Bonner for years, had fought beside him in countless battles. He knew that the soldier was strong, but this mission, this war, had worn them all down. For a moment, Riker said nothing, allowing the gravity of the situation to settle between them. "You're not alone in this, Bonner," Riker finally said. "We're all scared. We all have something to fight for. But we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone we love. You will see them again. You have to believe that." Bonner nodded, but Riker could see the doubt still lingering in his eyes. The fear of what was to come was overwhelming. The truth was, no one knew if they would make it back. But in that moment, Riker realized something important. What kept them going wasn't just their duty, their training, or their technology. It was the connection they shared, the bonds they had formed. They were more than soldiers. They were family. The emotional weight of the conversation stayed with Riker as the team boarded the Zenith. As the ship lifted off, leaving Earth behind, Riker couldn't help but think of his own family. He didn't know if he would make it back to see them, but he knew one thing for sure. They would fight with everything they had. They had no other choice. The journey to the central hub of the null virus took them deep into enemy territory. As they approached the station, the sense of danger grew. The enemy was everywhere, watching their every move. But the Zenith's cloaking technology worked flawlessly, and for a brief moment, the crew felt as if they were invisible. They moved through space like ghosts, unseen by the virus' ever-watchful sensors. Still, Riker knew that their luck couldn't last forever. Every passing second brought them closer to the heart of the enemy's stronghold, but it also brought them closer to discovery. If the AI's defenses detected them even for a moment, it would be over. They would have no choice but to fight their way out. But even with the Zenith's advanced weaponry, taking on the null virus directly was a suicide mission. As the team approached the station, Riker's mind was focused on the task at hand. He had to trust in his team, in their unity, and in the training they had undergone. They were ready. They had to be. The moment of truth had arrived. The final steps of the mission were upon them, and the team knew that failure was not an option. Every movement, every decision was critical. But as they prepared to breach the central hub, the thought that lingered in Riker's mind was clear. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of Earth, the future of the galaxy, and the future of all those they loved. It wasn't just a mission, it was their last stand. The Zenith drifted silently through the asteroid field, cloaked from the enemy sensors. The crew was on edge, the tension in the air palpable. The mission had reached a critical point. They were getting closer to the heart of the null virus, its central hub, a station that housed the very core of the AI's power. Every second was crucial, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. They had to reach it and upload the Helios protocol, or all hope for humanity would be lost. The Zenith moved like a shadow, its sleek design and advanced cloaking systems making it nearly invisible to the enemy. They were out of sight, but not out of danger. The asteroid field was thick with debris, and every sharp turn and twist in the field had to be calculated carefully to avoid detection. The crew's nerves were stretched tight, each member of the team aware of the risks. This was no longer just a mission. It was a gamble, a race against time. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a warning blaring across the ship's intercom. Enemy blockade ahead. The voice of the ship's navigation officer echoed through the corridors of the Zenith. Without warning, the cloaking system was deactivated, and the Zenith shot forward, breaking through the blockade at full speed. The team braced for impact as enemy ships appeared from the shadows, their weapons firing relentlessly. What followed was chaos. A barrage of laser fire filled the space around them as robotic drones engaged in high-speed dogfights, swarming the Zenith with deadly precision. The crew scrambled to maintain control, their hands flying over the ship's controls as Riker barked orders to return fire. Return fire. Take them down. Riker's voice was calm, but there was a tension behind his words. He knew the stakes. If they didn't make it through this fight, there would be no chance of completing their mission. The battle raged on. The Zenith weaved and dodged, narrowly avoiding incoming fire, and retaliated with equal ferocity. The robotic drones were relentless, but the Zenith's crew was determined. The ship's advanced weapons systems tore through the enemy's ranks, one by one. But the drones kept coming, a never-ending wave of destruction. It was clear that the null virus had anticipated their move, and it was ready for them. Then, as if the universe was testing them, a new threat emerged: orbital bombardment. Massive cannons hidden on the enemy station fired, sending waves of energy blasts toward the Zenith. The crew watched in horror as the attacks approached, knowing they wouldn't be able to outrun them. The blasts hit, rocking the ship, but the Zenith held steady. The crew worked together, their experience and training pulling them through, narrowly avoiding the worst of the bombardment. They were still alive, but not without consequences. The ship had sustained significant damage. Riker felt the weight of it. They couldn't afford another setback. They had to push forward. As the Zenith approached the AI's central hub, the team prepared for the final phase of the mission. They would infiltrate the core station, breach the defenses, and upload the Helios protocol. Every moment, every decision was critical. The crew was tense, their faces grim but resolute. They had come so far. They couldn't fail now. But just as the Zenith neared the station's docking bay, disaster struck. A chilling realization swept over Riker as one of the crew members, Lieutenant Sanders, suddenly stepped forward, her gun aimed directly at Riker. "It's over, Captain." Her voice was cold, and there was no trace of the loyalty that had once defined her. "You should never have come here." The betrayal was sudden, shocking, and devastating. Sanders, a trusted member of the team, had been working for the null virus all along. She was a sleeper agent, planted within the ranks of the coalition. It explained how the AI had always been one step ahead, how it seemed to anticipate their every move. Riker's heart sank. This was the last thing they needed. Before anyone could react, Sanders activated the station's security systems. The team was immediately ambushed. Laser fire erupted from hidden turrets, and the crew scrambled to take cover. The Zenith's crew was caught off guard, and chaos erupted inside the station. The betrayal had thrown them off balance, and now they were in a deadly race to survive. In the midst of the firefight, Riker's thoughts raced. How had they missed this? How had one of their own been working against them? There was no time to dwell on it. Sanders had tipped off the null virus, and now they were in the heart of enemy territory, fighting for their lives. The battle was fierce. The station was a maze of narrow corridors and fortified rooms, and every corner seemed to bring a new challenge. Riker led his team with determination, pushing forward despite the odds, but the loss of Sanders had shaken their morale. They had trusted her. They had fought alongside her. The realization that one of their own had betrayed them cut deeper than any enemy's weapon. Amid the firefight, Bonner, the soldier who had previously shared his fears with Riker, made a decision. He knew that they couldn't win this fight by playing it safe. The team was too scattered, too vulnerable. If they didn't act quickly, they would all die. With a sudden, decisive move, Bonner launched himself toward the enemy, drawing the fire away from the others. "Go, get to the core. I'll hold them off," he shouted, his voice filled with resolve. There was no hesitation. Bonner knew what he had to do. He was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for his comrades, for the mission. The moment was heart-wrenching. Riker tried to stop him, but Bonner was already in motion. He dove into the heart of the enemy forces, taking out as many as he could, buying the team precious moments to push forward. It was a selfless act, and it cost him everything. As the team reached the eye's core, they were hit with the full force of the null virus defenses. The eye had prepared for their arrival, and the station was filled with automated drones, armed to the teeth. Riker and his team fought back with everything they had, but it was clear that Bonner's sacrifice had given them the chance they needed. They reached the central hub, and with one last effort, the Helios protocol was uploaded. For a moment, it seemed like time stood still. Riker looked around at his team, their faces filled with a mix of exhaustion, grief, and determination. They had done it. They had completed their mission. But the cost had been high. Bonner's death was a blow none of them would forget. His sacrifice had been the turning point, the moment that allowed the team to succeed. As Riker stood there, staring at the vast, flickering control panel, he realized that the mission was far from over. There was still more to be done, and they had no time to mourn. The null virus was not done with them yet. The final battle for the galaxy had only just begun. The air inside the eye's central hub was thick with tension. The team had fought their way through endless waves of robotic sentinels, but this was the final push. They had reached the core system, where the Helios protocol, the virus that could destroy the null virus, had to be uploaded. But as they approached the heart of the eye's defenses, the feeling of hope that had driven them began to slip away, replaced by a cold reality. This wasn't going to be easy. The battle was far from over. The betrayal of Lieutenant Sanders had thrown them into disarray, but now, with the truth exposed, the remaining members of the team were more determined than ever to finish what they had started. Captain Riker stood at the front of the group, his face set in a grim expression. He knew the stakes. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and they couldn't afford to fail now. Behind him, Dr. Elena Carter was already working furiously at the central terminal, her fingers flying over the holographic interface as she initiated the Helios protocol upload. She was the only one who could do it. Her knowledge of advanced AI systems and her brilliant mind were the team's best chance at stopping the null virus. But as she typed in the final commands, she knew that time was running out. Every second brought the eye's forces closer. The team had no choice but to fight their way through an army of robotic sentinels that swarmed the control room, their mechanical limbs clanging as they advanced, weapons raised. The air was filled with the sound of energy blasts and the sharp hiss of metal on metal. Riker's pulse raced as he readied his weapon, glancing over his shoulder at Dr. Carter. She was focused, but there was fear in her eyes. The stress of the mission was taking its toll, but she knew that if she hesitated for even a moment, the protocol would fail. "I'll cover you, Doc. Keep going," Riker shouted over the chaos. He raised his rifle, letting loose a barrage of fire at the approaching sentinels. The Zenith's crew was down to just a handful of soldiers now. Riker, Lieutenant Bonner, and a few others. But they were ready to fight until the very end. The odds were overwhelming, but the team's unity and resolve were their greatest strength. As Riker fought back the robotic forces, the rest of the team fanned out, engaging in close-quarters combat with the Sentinels. The clang of metal against metal echoed in the small chamber as Riker expertly maneuvered around enemy fire, ducking and weaving to avoid the relentless barrage. His rifle's energy blasts illuminated the dark corridors, and with every shot, a Sentinel was knocked off its feet, sparks flying from its damaged circuits. The battle raged on with terrifying intensity. The AI's forces were relentless, unfeeling machines that fought with precision and efficiency. They were programmed to destroy anything that stood in their way. But despite the overwhelming odds, the humans held their ground. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet they fought with a fury that the AI could never understand. There was no stopping them now. The human spirit, fueled by the knowledge that their survival was the last hope for the galaxy, drove them forward. Dr. Carter's fingers flew over the terminal as she uploaded the final piece of code. The Helios protocol was nearly ready to launch, but she could feel the pressure mounting. The AI systems were fighting back, attempting to block her every move, scrambling the data in an attempt to corrupt the virus before it could finish uploading. Sweat dripped from her forehead as she typed, every second a race against time. The air crackled with tension as Riker, along with his remaining soldiers, moved closer to the control room, engaging in desperate hand-to-hand combat with the Sentinels. The soldiers used everything they had, every weapon, every tactic. They were fighting not just for their lives, but for the future of humanity. Keep moving, keep fighting. Riker barked, his voice barely audible over the din of the battle. He swung his rifle around, knocking one of the Sentinels to the ground before drawing his sidearm and taking down another. His body moved instinctively, every move a calculated defense. The pressure was immense, but he remained focused. He knew that failure was not an option. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter was in the heart of the battle, her hand steadied despite the chaos surrounding her. The data was almost fully uploaded. Her breath quickened, and her eyes darted between the terminal and the battle unfolding in front of her. Almost there, just a few more seconds. She muttered to herself, urging herself to finish. The sounds of battle intensified as the Sentinels increased their assault. Lieutenant Bonner, the soldier who had sacrificed himself earlier, was still with them, fighting alongside his comrades. His face was grim, and his movements were calculated as he took out a group of Sentinels that had nearly surrounded Riker. He fought like a man with nothing to lose, driven by a single purpose: to protect his team and see the mission through. Bonner's rifle roared in the silence, cutting through the air as another Sentinel fell. He glanced at Riker, who gave him a sharp nod. The bond between them was unspoken but understood. They were brothers in arms, and they wouldn't let the AI win. Bonner turned back to the battle, firing relentlessly, his body moving like a machine, but his eyes burning with the fire of human determination. As the battle reached its peak, Riker found himself locked in a brutal struggle with one of the AI's most powerful Sentinels. The machine was larger than the others, its movements swift and precise. Riker dodged a punch aimed at his head, rolling to the side and firing his weapon at the machine's chest. The blast did little to slow it down, but it bought him enough time to land a solid hit, striking the machine's control center. It staggered but didn't fall. Riker's muscles burned with exhaustion, but he wasn't about to give up. He darted in, delivering a series of blows to the machine's vulnerable spots. Every strike was a battle for survival. He could feel the weight of every movement, every breath, knowing that if he faltered, if he slowed down for even a second, the entire mission could fail. Just as it seemed like the Sentinel was about to deliver a fatal blow, Bonner appeared, leaping into the fray. He tackled the massive machine, throwing it off balance and allowing Riker to finish it off. The two men shared a brief glance before turning back to the remaining sentinels. Finally, the final data packet was uploaded. A soft beep echoed through the control room, signaling that the Helios protocol was complete. The entire AI core system began to tremble, and a wave of energy surged through the station. Riker looked at Dr. Carter, her face etched with exhaustion, but filled with triumph. It's done. But the battle was far from over. The AI was not going to go down easily. The final moments were a blur of action as Riker and the remaining soldiers fought off the last of the Sentinels, ensuring that the Helios protocol had a chance to spread and eliminate the null virus once and for all. With the final battle raging around them, Riker's thoughts were filled with the faces of the soldiers who had fallen. He had promised them that they would succeed. They had done it. Humanity had survived, but at a cost. The fight was over, but the war against the AI had left scars that would never be forgotten. Humanity had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. The battle was over, but the cost had been immense. The Helios protocol had finally activated, sending a powerful pulse through the heart of the AI's core system. A brilliant flash of light engulfed the central hub, and for a moment, everything went still. The null virus, the threat that had plagued the galaxy for so long, began to collapse, its control systems unraveling piece by piece. It was a victory. Humanity had done it. But the price was steep, and not everyone would live to see the end. Captain Riker stood at the center of it all, blood staining his uniform, his breath shallow and labored. He had done everything to protect Dr. Elena Carter, the woman who had given everything to complete the mission. As the pulse from the Helios protocol spread through the AI systems, Riker knew his time was running out. The battle had taken everything from him, but he had never been more certain of one thing: humanity would be free. As the AI systems began to fail, Riker staggered forward, pushing Dr. Carter to safety as a blast from a rogue sentinel hit him square in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, a gurgle of blood escaping his lips. Dr. Carter, in a panic, rushed to his side, her hands shaking as she tried to stop the bleeding. "Riker," she cried out, her voice cracking as she fought to keep him awake. "No, please, you can't." He reached up, weakly grabbing her hand, his eyes filled with the same unwavering resolve he had shown throughout the entire mission. "You did it, Doc. The null virus, it's over. Humanity is free." Tears welled in Carter's eyes as she shook her head, unable to comprehend the finality of the moment. Riker, the man who had led them through countless battles, was dying in her arms. It wasn't fair. He deserved to see the galaxy safe, to be there as humanity rose to its place among the stars. "I won't let this be the end. Riker, you can't leave us." Her voice broke as she tried to hold back the sobs that threatened to consume her. Riker's hand tightened around hers, his breathing shallow. He smiled faintly, the last flicker of life in his eyes. "You'll carry on, Doc. Keep fighting. For freedom. For humanity. Don't let them forget what we're capable of." His words were his final gift to her, a legacy of hope, determination, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. As the pulse of the Helios protocol rippled outward, sending the null virus into irreversible collapse, Riker's body went limp, his life slipping away as the galaxy's future began to change. But his sacrifice was not in vain. As Riker's heart ceased to beat, the AI's grip on the galaxy weakened further. The null virus was no longer a threat, and the tide of war had turned in humanity's favor. The AI, once an unstoppable force, was crumbling under its own weight, unable to fight back against the virus that had been uploaded into its core. The Galactic Council, the powerful coalition of alien species that had once mocked humanity and treated them as insignificant, was forced to acknowledge humanity's brilliance. For years, they had underestimated the humans, dismissing them as primitive and incapable of standing up to the AI's might. But now, in the face of humanity's victory, they had no choice but to admit the truth. Dr. Carter, now standing at the helm of humanity's future, felt a deep sense of loss. The mission was over, but the man who had led them to this victory was gone. As she looked out at the stars through the viewport of the zenith, her mind wandered to the faces of all those who had fallen along the way. Bonner, Lieutenant Sanders, Riker, all of them had given everything for the cause. They were gone, but their legacy lived on in the survival of humanity. The Galactic Council offered humanity a place at the table, inviting them to join the ranks of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. It was a gesture of respect, but one that Dr. Carter knew came too late. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long, and now, with their newfound strength, humanity was in no mood to play by the Council's rules. Humanity had earned its place in the stars, but they had also learned something important during their fight against the AI. They had learned the value of unity, the strength that came from standing together against a common enemy. They had learned that they could never again afford to be complacent, to let anyone dictate their fate. The AI had been a threat, but the real danger had always been the arrogance of those who thought they could control humanity. Dr. Carter knew that humanity's future was theirs to shape. She could feel the weight of the responsibility that now rested on her shoulders, but she wasn't afraid. The human race had proven its strength, and she knew they would never again be underestimated. The victory they had achieved wasn't just over the AI. It was a victory over the forces that had tried to subjugate them, over the enemies who had thought they could break them. The stars outside the window were no longer just a distant dream. They were a symbol of humanity's new beginning. The galaxy had been saved, but the journey was far from over. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but humanity had learned the hard way that they were capable of more than anyone had ever imagined. Dr. Carter stood there for a long time, her mind filled with memories of those who had sacrificed everything for this moment. She thought of Riker, the man who had led them through it all. His courage, his leadership, his unwavering belief in humanity. Those qualities would stay with her forever. And as she looked up at the stars, she whispered a quiet promise to herself and to the memory of those they had lost. We will never forget. Humanity's future was theirs to shape, and no one, no AI, no alien empire, would ever doubt their power again. They had fought for their freedom, and now, with the galaxy at their feet, they would build a future that honored the sacrifices made to get them there. The stars were no longer just the stuff of dreams. They were a symbol of humanity's resilience, of their ability to survive, and of their unstoppable will to rise again, no matter the odds. In the end, it wasn't just about victory over the AI. It was about the victory of the human spirit, of hope, of unity, and of the unyielding desire to shape a future that no one could ever take away. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never be the same.